Welcome to Ghost Carrier, our 15-part alternative history audio series about a world where America lost the Pacific War. This is the tale of a doomed aircraft carrier and its crew, stranded in the vast Pacific by a supernatural twist of fate. This story has been adapted from my book, Ghost Carrier. You can purchase the full version in paperback, Kindle, or audiobook from the links in this episode's description. I'm Robert Child, and our final episode will begin in a moment. Summer is a great time for catching up on military history, and my book about the 7 Black Medal of Honor recipients of World War II, Immortal Valor, has just been released in paperback. Immortal Valor chronicles these timeless heroes' life journeys through all the pain and struggle until their ultimate triumphs. I hope you pick up the new paperback version, hardcover or audiobook, available in stores and online.
Ghost Carrier, They Died to Fight Another Day. Written by Robert Child. Narrated by Kirk Winkler. USS Liscum Bay, Radar Room, 0408 hours, 23 November 1943. Bobby Cannon jolted to consciousness, alive once again, sitting in front of his PPI radar scope. He slowly opened his eyes. He brought his hands to his chest and felt his body. Then he reached up and placed a hand on his face above his right temple. He remembered the last image he saw was the Japanese officer firing point blank at him, but he felt no entry wounds. He was alive. He couldn't believe it. He looked up at the clipboard hanging over the scope with notes from the night radar man. His eyes focused on the date, 23 November 1943. He cocked his left wrist and read his watch, 0430 hours. My God, he thought as he turned his attention to the scope. In the upper left quadrant blinked a faint single surface blip 4.334 nautical miles to the northwest, moving at 10 knots. The craft was bearing 40 degrees southeast toward the battle group. Chills ran down his spine, and as they did, the radar signature disappeared. "Sir! Sir!" Bobby yelled over to Lon Turner, the fire control officer. Bobby instantly recalled he did not remember Turner being on the peninsula. He survived the sinking. Turner moved quickly over to Bobby's station. "Sir, I just registered a K-6 type Japanese sub heading straight toward the task force at 10 knots. Turner strained to see it on radar. "Where?" "It dove just as I registered the signature, but its last position was here," he said, pointing on the scope. "You're certain?" "Absolutely no doubt, sir." Bobby was emphatic. "It was heading right for us." Turner looked directly at PFC Cannon. "Well, if you're wrong, sailor, there's going to be hell to pay." Turner paused. "But if you're right, you may have just saved hundreds of lives in this task force." Turner picked up the receiver in front of the radar station and yelled into it, "Get me Captain Wiltsey." Joe Rusk jolted to consciousness in his bunk to the general quarters alarm. General quarters, all personnel, man your battle stations." He heard the voice echo down the ship's corridors. Joe felt his body all over with his hands. He was alive. He was back. He immediately reached up to the shelf above his bunk. "Frankie's picture!" he yelled as he held it in his hands. Lonnie and Sam were up and pulling on their shirts and shoes. "Come on, Joe, we gotta move," Lonnie shouted. Joe jumped out of bed and looked over at Sam. Sam pointed to his watch with a nod. Joe looked down at his. It read 0435 hours, 30 minutes before the carrier was originally struck. Joe looked back up at Sam and nodded his head, confirming he knew what Sam meant. They had time if only they could get topside. Joe paused then. An odd look crossed his face. He looked back down at his watch. It was the Hamilton he had given Franny. Lonnie finished tying his boot and stood up looking over at Joe in his white T-shirt. "Rusk, why the hell are you wearing 2 sets of dog tags?" 0445 hours. On the perimeter circle of the task force, destroyers Hole, Hughes, Maury, and Franks were executing defensive maneuvers, rolling Mark 9 and Mark 14 depth charges filled with 200 pounds of TNT into the sea on the direct orders of Admiral Mullenix. Adding to the urgency, destroyer Hull had departed the task group at 0400, bound for Macon Island. This left an unprotected gap the perimeter ships were maneuvering to fill. Captain Wilsey had been hesitant to rely on the observations of a junior radar officer. Mullenix was not. He instantly overrode the captain's order to launch a single reconnaissance aircraft. Instead, the admiral put all ships in the task force on general quarters, engaged the destroyers, and launched all 13 Avengers and Wildcats on the flight deck, already fueled and armed with torpedo bombs. Joe lingered a moment, ignoring Lonnie's comment about his 2 dog tags. It had only confirmed to him that everything he had endured was real. After Lonnie had rushed out of the cabin to his battle station, Joe took Sam by the shoulder and they headed up the steel ladder to the flight deck. Sailors were rushing to their destinations with determined faces. Joe's group, now numbering 20 strong, was met by Petty Officer Ronald Dawkins as they emerged on the flight deck. "You men get to your battle stations right now," he shouted. "What's going on?" Joe shouted back. "Jap sub was sighted 4 miles out." Joe and the men looked over to the flight deck as the last of the 13 torpedo bombers lifted off. "Now, you men get—" The petty officer stopped mid-sentence at the sound of a violent explosion. All the men turned to see a 200-foot waterspout surface 6,000 yards away near the destroyer Hole. The destroyer Hole had scored a direct hit with its salvo of depth charges on Japanese submarine I-175. Japanese commander Sumano Tabata and all 100 hands perished that instant in the blast, but not before they were able to launch a single, fully armed but somewhat damaged Type 95 torpedo from a bow tube. Ensign Tom Ewell surveyed the explosion through binoculars a short distance away at Liscombe's 40mm gun. Peering out to sea, he spotted an erratic white bubbling wake in the inky black water. He shouted, "Torpedo! Here comes a torpedo!" Joe and the men rushed to the starboard rail in the direction of the explosion and onrushing torpedo. The Type 95 was the fastest and most explosively powerful torpedo launched by any Navy on Earth. But this 95 was not traveling at its normal speed of 90 kilometers per hour. It was traveling at half that speed and arcing on a path that appeared to be veering away from the carrier. Joe and the men watched the white arcing wake coming toward them and held their collective breaths. At about 70 yards distant, the torpedo continued on its westerly arc, which sent it sailing past the carrier, narrowly missing the bow by just 15 yards. The men surrounding Joe cheered, as did Petty Officer Dawkins. Others dropped to their knees and gave thanks. Joe simply closed his eyes in silent prayer and looked down and lifted up the second dog tag hanging from his neck. Theodore Akins, 337984C, Type A, USN. Dayton, Ohio. Frank, in deep concentration in Maria's wingback chair for the last 2 hours, had recounted new memories of his life with his father. His memories had been at times silly, other times deeply moving, but for Frank they now were reality. Frank felt an intense, growing, and palpable distance from his current life, as if he were rushing on a bullet train still sitting in his chair. His short-term memories seemed completely gone. all that remained were images of his family, the people he loved. He couldn't remember what he did for work or even his address, and he didn't even care as he held his eyes shut, reliving his spiraling new memories in his mind. All right, we have come to your last significant memory. You are about to celebrate your 70th birthday with your family, and your dad is going to be there, Maria said. Frank heard her voice, but she seemed to be speaking to him from thousands of miles away, like she was calling to him from across an ocean. Place yourself there, Maria continued. I want you to experience every sight, smell, and sound from that day. I want you to... And then her voice in Frank's head went silent as the room and the chair itself started to spin. He tried to open his eyes, but they would not budge. It was the same feeling he had during the visions of his father on the ship. Someone or something was keeping his eyes closed. Suddenly, the swirling of the room stopped like he had entered the eye of a hurricane. He heard a loud crack, then a voice. It grew louder and more intense. The voice was speaking nonsense, just banter and small talk. He felt like he was traveling at rocket speed toward it, still unable to open his eyes. For the first time in the whole process, Frank was terrified. USS Liscum Bay, 0900 hours, 23 November 1943. Joe returned to his cabin after securing his battle station. He felt exhausted by the roller coaster of emotions and the day's events. He felt his body slowing, not tiring, simply slowing. It's the only way he could describe it. His movements seemed to take longer. Removing his shirt, then taking off his boots took forever. He felt new aches and pains in his lower back which hadn't been there before. His mind also seemed to be flashing images of memories he didn't recognize, memories of his son. He felt queasy as the room itself seemed to start spinning. He rushed into the head to splash cold water on his face to see if it would help. As he leaned over the small white porcelain sink and turned on the tap, the bathroom itself began to change. It was not spinning, it was changing. Joe quickly doused his face with water and finally looked in the mirror. To his shock, he had become an old man in his 80s. He did not have on his white navy t-shirt. He was wearing a red knit polo and a blue windbreaker. His hair was completely white, and his face sagged and was deeply lined. On the top of his head was a black baseball cap with gold stars and the words USS Liscum Bay, CVE 56, World War II veteran. Barbershop, Dayton, Ohio. Frank jolted to consciousness in a brown barber chair and finally was able to open his eyes. Hey, whoa there, Frank. Don't move so quick. Don't want to cut an ear off with these scissors. Stan? Frank asked, recognizing his cousin. What, did you forget my name after all these years? He said as he chuckled. You nodded off for a couple minutes, but I didn't disturb you 'cause you were keeping still. Frank immediately jumped to his feet, trying to get his bearings, as Stan looked at him strangely. Stan, what day is this? What year is this? Well, last time I checked it was 2013. As for the day, it's your birthday. My 70th birthday? Yep. Hey, Frank, you okay? You need a drink of water or something? Frank waved him off. No, maybe I'll just use the restroom. He needed a moment to splash water on his face and regroup. Sure, Stan said, but your dad's still in there. Wait a minute, Stan, did you say my dad? He's alive? Stan chuckled. As far as I know, but he has been in the John a long while. Maybe we should check on him. Stan yelled toward a small wooden door at the back of the barber shop. Hey, JR, everything coming out okay in there? Don't be messing up my plumbing. Frank peered in the direction of the bathroom door. Inside the bathroom, Joe Rusk stared at himself in the mirror and turned toward the voice. "J.R.? Who, me?" he responded. "Unless you got someone else in there with you, J.R." Stan looked at Frank and laughed. "Your son thinks you've been in there so long he's afraid you passed away." Joe's eyes widened. "Frankie?" Frank froze as inside the bathroom Joe twisted the door handle. Frank trembled as he watched the door open slowly and an elderly man appear. Tears instantly rolled down both cheeks as he called out, "Pop! Oh, my God, Pop!" "Frankie?" Joe asked as he shuffled out, tears springing to his eyes. Stan stood watching the two, completely bewildered, but making a joke to cover the moment. "Geez, you'd think you guys had never seen each other before." Joe looked at the barber and smiled as Frank rushed to embrace him, and Joe commented, "How right you are!" Frank wrapped his arms tight around his father as Joe reached up a wrinkled hand and caressed his son's face. "Boy, I've missed you." "I missed you too. I love you, Dad." "You were my reason to keep fighting, Frankie, to keep living. You mean more to me, son, than you can ever know." Stan stood, barber scissors in hand, staring at the two. He did not understand what was happening, but he brought a hand up to his eye and brushed away an unexpected tear and wiped his nose and said, "Hey, why don't you two guys get out of here? You don't want to miss your own birthday party, Frank." Frank turned to Stan, then looked back at his father. "I guess we should go meet the family," Joe said. "Yeah, Pop, let's go do that." Frank put an arm around his dad and led him out of the shop to the car. He never wanted to let go. Dayton, Ohio. On the ride home, Frank and Joe both felt there was so much to say, but nowhere to begin, so they rode in silence for a short while. Then Frank finally turned to his dad. "Is this real, Pop? I mean, is this some kind of crazy, wonderful dream, and I'm going to wake up any second? If it is, I don't want to wake up." "I really don't know, son. I feel real. I've got new aches and pains I never felt. You look real. How is this possible?" Joe pondered a moment, then glanced out the window to strange, modern-day sights. He chose his words carefully. "Frankie, I'm not smart enough to dream this or make this stuff up. This world, this car, the way you look, I'm just not that clever." Then he smiled. Frank laughed, his apprehension eased. "It sure feels real to me, Frankie. The only thing that's never changed is my love for you, son. It's the only thing I had in 43, and it's the only thing I still got." "Me too," Frank said, as his eyes teared once again, and he continued to drive. Rusk Home, Dayton, Ohio. Frank found the address that was listed on his driver's license. It was a nice part of town on Crestwood Avenue. As he pulled in the driveway with his dad, he thought 1291 Crestwood Avenue seemed strangely familiar. "Nice home, son. Looks like you've done well." "Yeah, sure does. This world's new to me, too." Frank and his dad approached and finally stood at the door. "Well?" Joe asked. "Yeah, right," Frank said as he knocked twice. "It's your house, Frankie." Frank laughed hard. His dad had a great sense of humor. Of course it was his house. What was he thinking? He found what looked like a front door key and used it to unlock the door. The door opened. "Surprise!" Frank and Joe entered to see 30 of their family and closest friends welcoming them to Frank's surprise 70th birthday party. Scanning the room, Frank finally caught sight of her. Katie. Thank God. He didn't think it possible, but she was even more beautiful in this new, parallel world. And yes, oh yes, there was his son Ben, and the twins in the middle of the crowd. It was perfect. "Who's the beautiful woman?" Joe asked his son, nudging Frank from his moment of wonder as Katie approached them. "We were starting to wonder about you two. What took you so long?" Frank kissed his wife and said, "We had some catching up to do." He winked at his father, who grinned. "Well, come on in, come on in. Let's get this party started." Frank had never been so deeply and truly happy in his entire life. His impossible wish had defied time and the laws of the universe to come true. After cake and coffee, Frank and his dad began to pore over the old photo albums that the kids had hauled out. So many moments, so many memories, so much love. They came to one particular album with a green canvas cover, and Katie said, "Oh, looks like the kids brought out one of your old albums too, Joe." Joe lifted the photo album to his lap. He opened the cover, and on the first cardboard page under the cellophane, the face of Theo Akins stared back at him. In the yellowed photo from the 70s, Theo and Joe were standing in front of a group of flags with some other men at some veterans event. Joe gasped, "My God, Theo Akins!" Katie laughed. "Theo, you used to call him Cousin Akins." Joe agreed with Katie. "Oh, yeah, right. How is, Cousin Akins? I want to give him a call." Katie looked at Joe and said sweetly, "Don't you remember? He passed away last year. You attended his funeral." "Oh, of course, how stupid of me. I forget sometimes," Joe said as he mourned the loss of his friend once again. "It was so nice of his son to give you Cousin Akins's things from the war. He really felt you should have them." "What things from the war?" Joe asked, not catching himself. He really did have to get up to speed with this new world. "Oh, you remember, just some small things that he thought you'd like to have, including Cousin Akins's dog tags." The next day, Joe had Frank drive him out to Greenlawn Cemetery, where Theo had been laid to rest. Frank maneuvered the car up the narrow drive and spotted Theo's gravestone near the front. "There it is, Pop." Frank stopped and put the car into park. Joe sighed. "Someday I'll tell you the story of this great man. I just don't think I got it in me today." "I understand, Pop. You go visit him." Joe gathered himself and reached in his windbreaker pocket. "I also got to return something." His hand closed around something tucked safely in his pocket. Theo's Navy dog tags from Molokai. Frank nodded as Joe exited the car and approached the grave. Frank decided to get out of the car too, in case his dad needed him. Joe stood a moment in silence 10 feet from the grave, then spoke. "Theo, you made me want to live again. You convinced me never to give up hope, no matter which world we were in. I guess we were always meant to be friends. You made me believe in heroes. You made me believe in getting home." Then Joe's trembling hand reached into his pocket for the dog tags, and he placed them on top of the granite gravestone. "These rightly belong to you." Then Joe snapped and held a salute. In his mind he heard soft and distant taps play. Frank bowed his head as his father brought his salute back down and turned back to him. "Son, maybe there's something almost as strong as the love of a father and a son." Frank nodded for his father to continue. "Maybe one more thing that can never die. The love for a friend."
I hope you've enjoyed this final episode of Ghost Carrier, our 15-part alternative history series. This story has been adapted from my book, Ghost Carrier. You can purchase the full version in paperback, Kindle, or audiobook from the links in this episode's description. And if you like what you hear, leave a review or a rating, or just click the follow button. I'm Robert Child, and this has been Ghost Carrier, only on Point of the Spear.
Music licensed from audioblocks.com. Point of the Spear is produced by RSC Media Group.